Hello everyone. Welcome back to Unheard Stories, your home for captivating tales of betrayal, revenge, and personal transformation. Before we dive into today's gripping story, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I love hearing from our amazing community. And hey, if you're someone who loves stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now imagine this, your marriage, a bond built on love and trust, suddenly starts to crack. What would you do if everything you thought was solid began to crumble right before your eyes? How far would you go to reclaim your self-respect and take control of your life? Today we're sharing the story of Rick, a husband whose world was shattered by betrayal but who refused to let it define him. This is a tale of heartbreak, strength, and turning the tables in a way no one could have predicted. Ready to dive in? Rick and Brenda seemed like the perfect couple to anyone looking from the outside. Rick, a man of quiet confidence and calm demeanor, was the foundation of their relationship. A problem solver by nature, he had built his career in finance, meticulously managing details with precision and care. Brenda, on the other hand, was his opposite in many ways, adventurous, charismatic, and full of energy. She worked in event management, a fast-paced field that thrived on creativity and adaptability. Despite their differences, their marriage seemed balanced. Rick admired Brenda's boldness, while she found comfort in his stability. Their daily routine was a reflection of their dynamic. Rick would prepare their morning coffee, always 2 cups ready before Brenda rushed out the door, already on the phone arranging her day. Evenings were usually spent together, sharing dinner, laughing over stories of Brenda's chaotic work events, and unwinding with their favorite shows. Rick adored Brenda and made it clear in countless ways. He was her biggest supporter, always encouraging her ambitions and celebrating her successes. Whether it was her work milestones or her personal projects, Rick made sure Brenda knew she had someone in her corner. But as the years passed, subtle changes began to creep into their lives. Brenda, who once eagerly shared every detail of her day with Rick, grew quieter. She started coming home later, claiming her work had become more demanding. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always in her hand or face down on the table. Rick noticed these shifts but brushed them aside, convincing himself that Brenda's workload was simply taking a toll. "She's just stressed," he told himself one evening as he ate dinner alone for the 3rd time that week. "Things will settle down soon." Still, the signs became harder to ignore. Brenda began spending more time out of the house, often mentioning vague plans to catch up with friends or work late on a project. Her once affectionate demeanor felt distant, replaced by a curt tone when Rick asked about her day. It was a Friday evening when the first real crack appeared. Brenda sat across from Rick at the dinner table, scrolling through her phone. When Rick asked her about her weekend plans, she hesitated before answering. "I might go out for dinner with some colleagues," she said, avoiding his gaze. Rick felt a twinge of unease but kept his voice steady. "That's nice. Anyone I know?" Brenda shrugged. "Just work people. Nothing important." Her dismissive tone didn't match the way she fidgeted with her phone, her eyes darting to it every few seconds. It was a small moment, but it planted a seed of doubt in Rick's mind. For the first time in their marriage, he felt like there was something she wasn't telling him. What Rick didn't realize then was that this was only the beginning of a storm that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his marriage. It was another late evening when Rick found himself sitting alone in the living room, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Brenda had been distant for weeks, her excuses for staying out late piling up like a storm cloud overhead. Still, Rick had always been one to give her the benefit of the doubt. She was his wife, the woman he loved, and trust had always been the cornerstone of their marriage. But that trust began to waver when Rick overheard a phone conversation he was never meant to hear. Brenda was in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones, her voice carrying an edge of excitement. "I can't wait to see you," she said softly. "Friday night works perfectly. I'll tell Rick it's just a work dinner." Rick froze, the words hitting him like a freight train. His mind raced to make sense of what he'd just heard. He wanted to believe there was some reasonable explanation, but the tone of her voice, the way she spoke, left little room for misinterpretation. When Brenda entered the living room moments later, her face was a mask of calm indifference. "Hey," she said casually, grabbing her purse. "I'll be late tomorrow, work stuff?" Rick decided to confront her directly, unable to hold back any longer. "Who's the dinner with?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. Brenda paused, caught off guard. "Just some colleagues," she replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze. "Don't lie to me," Rick said, his tone sharper now. "I heard you on the phone. Who are you meeting?" Her face flushed as she struggled to maintain her composure. Rick, it's not what you think. It's just a friend. Someone I met through work. A friend? Rick repeated, his voice dripping with disbelief. You're planning to lie to me about a work dinner and sneak off to meet some man, and you call that a friend? Brenda's defenses went up, her tone turning defensive. You're overreacting. I'm allowed to have friends, Rick. Don't make this into something it's not. Rick stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on him. Brenda, if it's just a dinner with a friend, why lie about it? Why not tell me the truth? Her silence was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. I didn't lie. I just didn't think it was worth explaining. You've always trusted me. Trusted you? Rick said, his voice rising slightly. How can I trust you when you're hiding things from me? When you're sneaking around? Brenda crossed her arms, her defiance masking the guilt in her eyes. You're the one making this a bigger deal than it is. You always try to control me, Rick. I'm not some possession you can dictate. Rick took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Control you? I've never controlled you, Brenda. But this isn't about control, it's about respect. About honesty. And right now you're showing me neither. Brenda's mask of defiance cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I don't know. Rick felt his chest tighten, his love for her clashing with the betrayal he couldn't ignore. Why, Brenda? He asked softly. Why are you doing this? What's missing? I don't know, she repeated, her voice barely audible. Maybe we've just grown apart? The words cut deeper than he thought possible, but Rick held himself together. If that's how you feel, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside, then tell me the truth. Say his name. Brenda looked down, her silence speaking volumes. Rick nodded, the gravity of the situation settling over him. I won't stop you from doing what you want, Brenda. But don't expect me to stand by and let you tear this marriage apart without consequences. As he walked away, Brenda called after him. Rick, wait. I didn't mean for it to come to this. I'll fix it, I promise. But Rick didn't look back. His mind was already racing with a plan, not to save the marriage but to salvage his dignity and take control of his life. That night, as he lay awake in the guest room, Rick's emotions churned, anger, sadness, and a fierce resolve. He realized that this wasn't just about Brenda's betrayal. It was about reclaiming his self-respect and proving that he was more than someone to be taken for granted. He wasn't going to fight for her love anymore. He was going to fight for himself. The confrontation with Brenda left Rick reeling, but it also ignited something within him, a determination he hadn't felt in years. That night, as he lay awake in the guest room, his thoughts crystallized into a plan. Brenda had taken him for granted, but she would soon learn that Rick was no longer the man she thought she could manipulate. Rick decided it was time to reclaim his self-worth. This wasn't about revenge, it was about rediscovering the confidence and strength he had lost somewhere along the way. For too long, he had put Brenda's needs and desires ahead of his own. Now it was his turn to take center stage. The next morning, Rick woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He started his day like any other, keeping his demeanor calm and collected so as not to alert Brenda to his plans. By the time she left for work, he was already envisioning his transformation. His first stop was the most prestigious unisex salon in the city. Rick had always kept his appearance tidy but unremarkable, a simple haircut, nothing flashy. Today was different. He wanted a look that exuded confidence and sophistication. The stylist worked with precision, giving Rick a modern, sleek haircut that framed his face perfectly. As he glanced in the mirror, he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. Looking sharp, the stylist remarked, smiling. Rick nodded, a small smile of his own forming. This was just the beginning. From the salon, Rick headed to an exclusive men's boutique. He browsed the racks, taking his time to find an outfit that would make a statement. A crisp white shirt caught his eye, followed by a well-tailored blazer in a deep navy hue. He paired it with perfectly fitting trousers and a pair of polished leather shoes. The ensemble was stylish without being over the top, just enough to turn heads without trying too hard. As he left the boutique, Rick felt a surge of confidence. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about Brenda's betrayal. He was thinking about himself, how good it felt to prioritize his own happiness and image. When Rick returned home, he heard the faint sound of the shower running upstairs. Brenda was already getting ready for her evening plans, oblivious to what Rick had been up to. He smiled to himself, the irony of the situation not lost on him. Instead of wallowing in anger or sadness, Rick focused on his next move. He showered, shaved, and carefully dressed in his new outfit, paying attention to every detail. As he adjusted the blazer in the mirror, he felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't the same man who had been blindsided by Brenda's lies just days ago. He was someone new, someone stronger. The moment of truth came when Brenda began descending the stairs. Rick was already waiting in the living room, sitting casually on the couch, his posture relaxed but confident. Brenda's outfit was striking, an eye-catching dress with a plunging neckline and a hemline that stopped just above the knee. It was obvious she was trying to make an impression. Brenda paused at the bottom of the stairs, clearly expecting some reaction from Rick. But he remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Well?" she asked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "What do you think?" Rick looked her over, his gaze calm and detached. "You're dressed for quite the evening," he said, his tone cool. "But so am I." Brenda blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Rick stood, adjusting the cuffs of his blazer. "I have plans tonight too," he said simply. "Did you think I'd just sit here and wait while you went off to meet another man?" Brenda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rick continued, his voice steady. "Her name is Charmaine," he said, watching as Brenda's eyes widened in disbelief. "She's waiting for me?" The name landed like a bomb, detonating in Brenda's mind. She stared at him, stunned. "Charmaine? Who's Charmaine?" Rick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed his keys and his polished leather wallet, moving with the composure of a man who had nothing to prove. "Let's just call her a friend," he said, smiling faintly. "Enjoy your evening, Brenda." Without waiting for a response, Rick walked out the door, leaving Brenda standing in the living room, her mind racing with questions and insecurities. As Rick drove through the city, he felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of freedom. The streetlights reflected on his car windows, casting a glow that matched his newfound clarity. For years, he had been the steady rock in his marriage, the dependable husband who put his wife's needs above his own. Tonight he was something else entirely, a man rediscovering his worth. Rick arrived at a stylish wine bar he had carefully selected earlier in the day. The ambience was perfect. Live piano music, dim lighting, and a refined elegance that mirrored his transformation. Charmaine, a platonic friend and co-worker he trusted, greeted him warmly. Their conversation was light-hearted, her laughter genuine, and for the first time in months, Rick felt truly alive. As the evening unfolded, Rick found himself smiling more than he had in years. On the dance floor, he and Charmaine moved effortlessly, their connection a testament to the joy of simply being in the moment. While his thoughts occasionally drifted to Brenda, they carried no bitterness. Instead, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Tonight wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming himself. Friday evening arrived, and with it, an air of tension that had been building all week. Brenda was upstairs, her footsteps echoing through the house as she prepared for her evening. Rick, now a man of calm resolve, sat in the living room sipping a glass of water and scrolling through his phone. Unlike the man who once wrestled with doubt and betrayal, tonight, Rick exuded an unshakable confidence. Brenda made her entrance with the deliberate flair of someone trying to command attention. She descended the stairs slowly, dressed in a figure-hugging black dress with a plunging neckline and a hemline that flirted dangerously above the knee. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled with meticulous care. She paused at the bottom of the stairs, glancing toward Rick with an expectant smile. "Well?" she asked, her tone a mixture of challenge and anticipation. "What do you think?" Rick looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. He let his gaze settle on her for a moment, not with admiration but with the detached curiosity of someone assessing a stranger. "You're certainly dressed to impress," he said coolly, setting his phone aside. Brenda tilted her head, her smile faltering. "You don't seem too impressed," she replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. Rick stood, adjusting the cuffs of his crisp white shirt. His tailored blazer and polished shoes gave him an air of sophistication that Brenda hadn't seen before. He was no longer the dependable husband sitting at home, waiting for her to return. He was someone else entirely, a man in control. "I didn't think it was worth making a fuss," he said simply. "After all, I have my own plans tonight." Brenda blinked, caught off guard. "Plans? What plans?" Rick smiled faintly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Her name is Charmaine," he said, watching as Brenda's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "We're meeting for drinks downtown?" "Charmaine?" Brenda repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Who's Charmaine?" Rick didn't answer right away. Instead, he grabbed his keys and wallet from the counter, moving with a deliberate calmness that only heightened Brenda's unease. "She's a friend," Rick said finally, his tone casual. "Someone who knows how to have a good time." Unlike some people, she's honest about what she wants. Brenda's face flushed, her composure beginning to crack. Are you seriously going out with another woman? She demanded, her voice sharp with jealousy. Rick shrugged. Why not? You've made it clear that we don't owe each other explanations anymore. Isn't that the arrangement you wanted? Brenda opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't the one holding the upper hand. Rick, once the man who would have done anything to please her, was now standing tall, his confidence unshaken by her games. As Rick stepped toward the door, he turned back to Brenda one last time. Enjoy your evening, he said smoothly. I know I will. With that, he walked out, leaving Brenda standing in the living room, her thoughts spinning. The image of Charmaine, whoever she was, loomed large in her mind, filling her with a gnawing jealousy she couldn't suppress. For the first time, Brenda felt the sting of consequences. Rick's calm, composed demeanor was a stark contrast to her unraveling emotions. He wasn't begging her to stay, wasn't consumed by jealousy or anger. Instead, he had flipped the script, leaving Brenda to confront the reality of what she had done. As the sound of Rick's car faded into the night, Brenda sank onto the couch, her carefully crafted confidence crumbling around her. She had underestimated him, and now she was left with nothing but the echo of his parting words. Rick's evening unfolded exactly as he had envisioned it. The wine bar he chose was a picture of sophistication. Dim lighting, soft piano music, and a buzz of conversation that created an atmosphere of quiet elegance. As he walked in, dressed in his sharp new attire, heads turned. For the first time in years, Rick felt truly seen, not as someone's husband or the quiet man in the background, but as an individual in control of his own narrative. Charmaine greeted him with a warm smile. She was a co-worker he had always respected, someone who shared his passion for life's finer moments. Their relationship was strictly platonic, but tonight her presence symbolized something far greater, Rick's newfound independence and clarity. As they sipped their drinks and chatted, Charmaine's laughter filled the air. Rick found himself smiling more than he had in months, the weight of his marriage's struggles momentarily lifted. They shared stories, discussed ambitions, and even took a turn on the small dance floor. It wasn't about romance, it was about rediscovering joy, confidence, and the simple pleasure of being in the moment. Meanwhile, back at home, Brenda was pacing the living room, her mind racing. Rick's parting words echoed in her ears, the name Charmaine gnawing at her like a relentless itch. Who was she? What was she to Rick? For the first time in their marriage, Brenda was the one left guessing, consumed by a jealousy she had never expected to feel. Her evening plans, once so thrilling, now felt hollow. The idea of meeting her lover seemed meaningless when all she could think about was Rick, out there somewhere with another woman. The tables had turned, and Brenda found herself grappling with the consequences of her own actions. Hours later, the sound of Rick's car pulling into the driveway jolted Brenda from her thoughts. She stood by the window, watching as he stepped out, his posture confident, his expression unreadable. As he walked through the door, she could barely contain herself. Who's Charmaine? She demanded, her voice sharp with jealousy and frustration. Rick calmly removed his blazer and hung it over the back of a chair. Charmaine? He repeated as if the name was of little importance. She's a friend. A friend? Brenda snapped. You expect me to believe that? You spent the whole night with her. Rick turned to face her, his gaze steady and unyielding. And you spent the evening with your lover, didn't you? He asked, his tone as cold as steel. Brenda faltered, her carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of his words. I didn't mean for things to get like this, she whispered. Rick took a step closer, his expression calm but firm. Didn't you? You made your choices, Brenda. And now you're facing the consequences. The word hung in the air, heavy with finality. Brenda's anger dissolved into silence, her jealousy and guilt warring within her. Rick didn't wait for her response. He picked up his things and retreated to the guest room, leaving Brenda alone with her thoughts. That night, as Brenda sat in the quiet house, she realized the depth of what she had lost. Rick wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. He had reclaimed his power, leaving her to confront the painful truth. Her actions had consequences and there was no turning back. As Rick lay in bed that night, the house was quiet, but his mind was anything but. He thought about the man he had been just weeks ago, unsure, hurt, and blindsided by betrayal. Now he felt like a different person entirely. The heartbreak that once consumed him had been replaced by a sense of empowerment and clarity. Rick realized something important on this journey. Self-respect isn't just about standing up for yourself. It's about knowing when to walk away from situations that no longer serve you. Brenda's betrayal had shattered their marriage, but it had also forced him to confront the truth about their relationship and ultimately about himself. He didn't feel anger or regret anymore. Instead, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing he had reclaimed control of his life. The future wasn't certain, but it was his to shape, free from the weight of Brenda's lies. What would you do in Rick's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more gripping tales of betrayal, revenge, and redemption on Unheard Stories. See you in the next one.